Hi. Every year we celebrate Memorial Day, a day to remember and honor those who gave their lives to fight for this particular country and in dying, who have contributed to its freedom. Especially in going through the book of Revelation, we know that as people who belong to Jesus, we need to remember our King is coming and our home is yet to appear. We might be living in the U.S. now, but we really belong to a different nation. In fact, we're ambassadors of our King and of that nation. Still, it's good to appreciate the history and story of different nations on earth. It's like being a missionary. Here we are in the U.S., and what a unique story this country has had. That's not being nationalistic, it's just enjoying the story of what God has done here. This landmass was found by accident. The first settlers came here for religious freedom, and they survived by dying, and because of that, receiving mercy from the Indians, one of whom had been taken as a slave to Europe. God's sovereignty in working through the sin of man and bringing life out of death shaped things in this land. The U.S. has never been a Christian nation, but lives of believing men and women used by God set a path, a backdrop. Building on the heritage from England, God has used this country to produce more missions, Bible schools, more missionaries than any other land on earth. It really wasn't the people doing it, God did it. Much of the courage of the men and women who have given their lives protecting this country has been born out of a cultural respect for God. That respect is fading, but it represented the backdrop of the life of this land for many years. As you look over what we see in the book of Revelation, all you can say is that the U.S. has been an interesting tool used by God for a specific season. God formed and protected this young nation. For example, back in September of 1814, two lawyers, John Skinner and Francis Scott Key, negotiated the release of Dr. William Beanes during the War of 1812. They could have all gone home immediately after gaining his release, except for the fact that their true ship was in Boston Harbor as British warships gathered to attack Fort McHenry. They were a captive audience to the 25-hour bombardment of this key fortress. You probably know the story of what God did there. The pouring rain, the British ships held slightly out of range of the fort, many bombs bursting in air before they could reach the fort, quickly illuminating the storm flag above the fort. Among the lives laid down in Fort McHenry were an African-American soldier and a woman who was taking supplies to the soldiers. One bomb made it through and landed in the fort's powder room. That wasn't the ladies' restroom. It was where the gunpowder was stored. That would have ended the entire battle, except that the fuse had gone out. What a lucky break. Francis Scott Key was so inspired by the battle that he began to write the words of the national anthem during the fighting and finished all 4 verses that day. We know the first verse, but I really like the 4th. It's a verse that would not be accepted today in the Congress of the United States. But back then, as God was forming this very interesting tool to use to get his word out into the world, this verse was accepted as truth. Oh, thus be it ever when free men shall stand between their loved home and the war's desolation. Blessed with victory and peace may the heaven-rescued land praise the power that hath made and preserved us a nation. Then conquer we must when our cause it is just. And this be our motto: in God is our trust. And the star-spangled banner in triumph shall wave o'er the land of the free, and the home of the brave. Compared to other nations, the U.S. barely has a history. Ask any European. But for this short time, the purpose for which God has used this place has borne fruit in his plan for the end of days. The U.S. is fading, but our Lord's purpose and plan remains strong and true. He's the King. We're his ambassadors. His kingdom is coming, and people need to hear and hurry and turn from their sin to him. We work for him and represent him on this planet until we are taken and the world begins to experience the revealing of the Son of Man. What an interesting place this has been and how God has used it. But we have to continue our work for our King and our kingdom. So let's do that. Maranatha.